The snow was coming down thick and fast now, swirling in the glow of the streetlights, creating an almost hypnotic, yet unsettling, dance outside their living room window. Sarah, wrapped in a thick blanket, watched the storm intensify, worry etched on her face. She tried to distract herself with a book, but the words blurred on the page, her mind unable to focus. "We should really go check on her, Mark," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor of anxiety she felt. "She's all alone, and it's getting really bad out there. What if she needs something?" Mark, who had been staring blankly at the television screen, nodded in agreement. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling of unease either. The wind whipped around them, stinging their faces with icy snow, each gust a forceful reminder of the storm's growing power. Each step was an effort, their boots sinking deep into the accumulating drifts, the soft crunch of their footfalls the only sound in the otherwise deafening silence. The usual comforting glow of the streetlights seemed feeble against the swirling white, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on their eyes. As they neared Mrs. Davis's house, a small, single-story bungalow nestled between two larger homes, Mark noticed the path leading to her front door. It was cleared, yes, but not with the meticulous care Mrs. Davis, a woman who took immense pride in her perfectly manicured lawn and flower beds, usually displayed. The shovel strokes were uneven, wide swathes of snow left untouched along the edges, creating a haphazard, almost desperate-looking pathway. A treacherous patch of ice, reflecting the faint light from a nearby window, glistened near the porch steps, a clear sign that the job had been rushed. Mark felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't like Mrs. Davis at all. Mark knocked, a sharp rap against the weathered wooden door that echoed unnaturally loud in the stillness of the snow-covered street. They waited. A long, agonizing silence stretched out, filled only by the whisper of the wind, the frantic beating of Sarah's heart, and the increasingly loud howl of the wind. Sarah shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her breath clouding in the frigid air. "Maybe she's asleep?" Mark said, his voice barely a whisper, though he knew it was unlikely. Mrs. Davis was a notoriously light sleeper. He knocked again, harder this time, a sense of urgency creeping into his voice. "Mrs. Davis? It's Mark and Sarah." Another pause, even longer this time. Sarah was about to suggest they try the back door when they heard it, the faint, slow creak of the door opening, a sound that sent a shiver of both relief and apprehension down her spine. Mrs. Davis stood in the doorway, her frail frame silhouetted against the warm, yellow light spilling from inside. Her silver hair, usually pulled back in a neat, tight bun, was loose around her shoulders, a few stray strands escaping, framing a face etched with wrinkles that spoke not just of age, but of a life well lived, a life filled with both joy and sorrow. Her eyes, though faded with age, held a spark of resilience, a flicker of something that refused to be extinguished. But tonight, that spark seemed dimmed, replaced by a weariness that went beyond mere physical fatigue. Her usual rosy cheeks were pale, and her smile, though present, was hesitant, almost fragile, as if it might shatter at any moment. She was clutching a worn, knitted shawl around her shoulders, her knuckles white as she gripped it tightly. She looked smaller, somehow, more vulnerable than they had ever seen her. Mrs. Davis smiled gently, a sad, wistful smile that tugged at Sarah's heart. Her eyes, reflecting both the sadness of her solitude and the warmth of their return, held a depth of feeling that Sarah had never noticed before. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice still frail, but laced with a gentle kindness. "It wasn't that I needed anything specific. It's just, well, it's different when you're not here. Knowing you're next door, it makes me feel safe. It makes this old house feel less empty." She squeezed Sarah's hand, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken bond between them. "It's silly, I know. An old woman like me, relying on the young folks next door." But it wasn't silly. It was profoundly human. The weight of her words, the simple yet profound truth of her statement, sank in deeply. Mark and Sarah instantly regretted not telling Mrs. Davis about their travel plans. They had been so caught up in the excitement of their vacation, the packing, the planning, the anticipation of escaping their routine, that they had never considered how their absence might impact her sense of security and companionship. They had always perceived her as fiercely independent, a woman who valued her privacy and self-sufficiency. They had never realized that beneath that independent exterior lay a vulnerability, a need for connection, that they had unknowingly been fulfilling. Standing there in the cold, the snow gently falling around them, creating a soft, ethereal glow, they realized the profound impact of their simple presence in their neighbor's life. It was a humbling, heartwarming realization, a reminder of the often unseen connections that bind a community together, the subtle ways in which we rely on each other, even without realizing it. Sarah, her voice choked with emotion, pulled Mrs. Davis into a gentle hug. "We're so sorry," she repeated, her words muffled against Mrs. Davis's shawl. "We'll never leave again without telling you. And we'll check on you more often, even when we're here." Mark nodded in agreement, his own throat tight with emotion. "We promise, Mrs. Davis. You're not alone." He pulled out his phone, a sudden impulse striking him. "Let's take a picture," he said, "to remember this moment." Mrs. Davis, initially surprised, smiled and straightened her shawl, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. They stood together, the three of them, framed by the softly falling snow and the warm glow of the porch light, a makeshift family forged in a moment of unexpected connection. The flash illuminated their faces, capturing the mixture of sadness, relief, and newfound understanding that shone in their eyes. It was a photograph that would become a cherished reminder of the importance of looking out for one another, of the simple yet powerful role they played in each other's lives, and of the unexpected bonds that can be formed in the quietest of neighborhoods, even amidst a raging snowstorm. From that day forward, things were different. Mark and Sarah made a conscious effort to include Mrs. Davis in their lives, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. They shared meals, stories, and laughter. They learned about her life, her late husband, her children who lived far away. They discovered a depth of wisdom and resilience in her that they had never appreciated before. The unsettling quiet of Elmwood Lane was replaced by a sense of warmth and connection, a testament to the power of human kindness and the enduring strength of community. The snowstorm had brought more than just snow. It had brought a profound and lasting change to their lives, a change that began with three simple words: "I missed you."